Introduction: Understanding Martial Law in the Philippines. Martial law in the Philippines, declared by President Ferdinand Marcos on September 21, 1972, was a significant event that reshaped the nation. Claimed to suppress communist insurgency and restore order, this period extended until 1981, profoundly impacting Philippine society, governance, and daily life. The declaration of martial law allowed Marcos to rule by decree, bypassing the legislative and judicial branches. The period was marked by both advancements and severe drawbacks. Infrastructure projects and a sense of order were touted as benefits, yet these came at the cost of human rights abuses, suppression of free speech, and alleged corruption. This complex legacy makes martial law a contentious topic in Philippine history, stirring debates on its implications and the balance between security and liberty. This essay explores the various dimensions of martial law in the Philippines, weaving together historical facts, expert opinions, and personal stories. It aims to provide a balanced perspective, highlighting the resilience of the Filipino people and the lessons learned from this pivotal era. The discussion will pave the way for understanding how martial law shaped the nation's path to democracy and its current political landscape. The road to martial law began long before its official declaration in 1972. The political climate of the Philippines during the late 1960s was tumultuous, with increasing civil unrest and a growing threat from the communist insurgency. President Ferdinand Marcos, initially elected in 1965, faced mounting challenges to his governance. In this context, Marcos argued that martial law was necessary to create a new society, a peaceful and orderly Philippines. Officially declared under Proclamation 1081, martial law was presented as a temporary measure to reform society and curb political and economic chaos. However, critics argue that it was a calculated move by Marcos to consolidate power and extend his rule, which was nearing its constitutional end. The immediate effects of the declaration were profound. The Constitution was suspended, Congress was dissolved, and opposition leaders, including Senator Benigno Aquino Jr., were arrested. Media outlets were shut down or controlled, and a curfew was imposed, drastically altering the daily lives of Filipinos and setting the stage for a regime characterized by a lack of opposition and centralized control. The imposition of martial law in the Philippines led to significant human rights abuses, an issue that continues to haunt its legacy. Amnesty International reports from the era document thousands of cases of arrests, torture, killings, and disappearances. The military and police were given unprecedented powers to enforce the law, often leading to abuses that went unchecked. Censorship was another hallmark of this period. The media was tightly controlled, with only state-sanctioned news allowed to be published or broadcasted. This suppression of free speech effectively silenced opposition and kept the populace uninformed about the government's activities, creating a culture of fear and compliance. Personal stories from this dark chapter include countless tales of activists, students, and ordinary citizens who were detained and tortured. One poignant story is that of a young student activist, Liliosa Hilao, who was one of the first to die under military custody, becoming a symbol of the struggle for justice and democracy. Economically, martial law had both positive and negative repercussions. Initially, the Philippines experienced a period of economic growth. Infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, and hospitals were developed, creating jobs and improving transportation and healthcare. Marcos championed these projects as evidence of the progress under his new society. However, this growth was overshadowed by rampant corruption and crony capitalism. Billions of dollars were borrowed from international lenders, plunging the country into debt. Much of this money went to Marcos and his associates, rather than towards sustainable economic development. By the early 1980s, the economic situation had deteriorated, leading to a crisis marked by debt, inflation, and unemployment. The economic policies during martial law laid the groundwork for long-term challenges that the Philippines continues to address. The heavy reliance on foreign debt and the concentration of wealth among a few impacted the economic landscape significantly, making the period of martial law a contentious era in terms of economic history. Section 5. Resilience and Resistance. Stories from the ground. Despite the oppressive regime, stories of resilience and resistance flourished throughout the martial law years. Across the archipelago, various groups, from students to farmers, organized underground movements and protests. These acts of defiance were critical in keeping the spirit of democracy alive among the populace. One notable example was the First Quarter Storm, a series of protests in 1970 that became a prelude to wider resistance against the regime. Students, academics, and ordinary citizens braved the streets, facing the military and police to voice out their dissent. These movements laid the foundational ethos for the eventual People Power Revolution of 1986. Moreover, the resilience of the Filipino community can be seen in the way people adapted to the harsh realities of martial law. Communities supported each other, sharing resources and safe spaces, and fostering a collective spirit that would eventually lead to the overthrow of Marcos. This period underscored the strength and courage of the Filipino people, traits that are celebrated in today's democratic Philippines. Section 6. The role of the Church and civil society. The Catholic Church and various civil society groups played pivotal roles during the martial law years in the Philippines. The Church, a significant institution in Filipino society, provided moral and sometimes logistical support to the opposition. Cardinal Jaime Sin, the Archbishop of Manila, was particularly influential, using his position to speak against the abuses of the Marcos regime. Civil society organizations, though heavily suppressed, also managed to operate covertly. These groups documented human rights abuses, provided support to political prisoners and their families, and kept the international community informed about the situation in the Philippines. Their efforts were crucial in maintaining a certain level of international pressure on the Marcos government. These organizations also played educational roles, teaching people about their rights and how to protect themselves under a repressive regime. This empowerment of ordinary citizens contributed significantly to the growth of a national consciousness that valued democracy and human rights, setting the stage for future civic engagement and participation in governance. Martial law was officially lifted in 1981, but President Marcos continued to rule with a strong hand until he was ousted in 1986. The lifting was largely cosmetic, aimed at pacifying domestic dissent and international criticism, particularly from the United States, which was a key ally and aid provider. Despite the formal lifting, the structures and practices of authoritarian rule remained largely intact. The years following the lifting of martial law were tumultuous. The assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. in 1983, upon his return from exile, sparked massive protests and a renewed call for change. This event was pivotal in galvanizing the opposition and the general populace against the continued rule of Marcos. The culmination of these events led to the People Power Revolution in February 1986, a peaceful uprising that saw millions of Filipinos from various walks of life converge on EDSA, a major highway in Metro Manila. This movement ultimately forced Marcos into exile and restored democracy in the Philippines, proving that the spirit of the people could triumph over tyranny. The martial law era in the Philippines offers crucial lessons in governance, human rights, and the resilience of a nation. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of concentrated power and the importance of checks and balances in a democratic system. The restoration of democracy in 1986 was not just a political shift, but a profound societal awakening to the value of democratic principles. Educational reforms have since been implemented to ensure that the lessons of martial law are taught in schools. This education aims to cultivate a generation that values transparency, accountability, and participatory governance. Moreover, the experiences from this period have shaped the Philippine legal and judicial landscapes, emphasizing human rights and the rule of law. The ongoing challenges of corruption, poverty, and political dynasties in the Philippines today are echoes of the martial law years. These issues underscore the need for continual vigilance and active civic engagement to safeguard the democratic gains and ensure that the dark days of authoritarian rule do not reoccur. Today, the perception of martial law in the Philippines varies greatly among its populace. For some, it was a period of peace and order, necessary for the country's development. For others, it remains a dark time of oppression and lost freedoms. This divide is often reflected in political discourse and is indicative of the complex legacy of Marcos's rule. Recent years have seen a resurgence in discussions about martial law, spurred by the political ascent of figures associated with the Marcos family. This has led to renewed debates and interest in the era, with various books, films, and academic discussions re-examining its impacts. These discussions are crucial for a nuanced understanding of Philippine history and for ensuring that the narratives of the victims are not forgotten. Moreover, the annual commemorations of the declaration of martial law serve as a reminder and a cautionary tale. They foster a collective reflection on the country's journey and the continuous effort required to preserve democratic values. This engagement with history is vital for the nation's future, ensuring that past errors are not repeated and that the ideals of justice and democracy prevail. Reflecting on the martial law period in the Philippines reveals a complex tapestry of pain, resilience, and ultimately, hope. This era highlighted the worst and best of the Filipino spirit, oppression countered by courageous resistance, and a collective striving for freedom. The lessons from this time are invaluable as the nation continues to navigate the challenges of governance, development, and social cohesion. As the Philippines moves forward, it is imperative to cherish and safeguard the democratic values reinstated after the martial law years. The spirit of EDSA should inform current and future generations, inspiring them to participate actively in governance and to hold their leaders accountable. The resilience shown by Filipinos during martial law is a testament to the enduring power of community and democracy. In conclusion, while martial law was a time of great hardship, it also served as a catalyst for significant social and political change. The enduring message is one of vigilance and active participation in democracy to ensure that the freedoms fought for are never again compromised. The future of the Philippines, enriched by its past struggles, holds the promise of a nation committed to justice, equality, and the rule of law.